10 people who vanished into thin air. Thousands of people go missing every year, and the most frustrating cases are those where the investigators have virtually nothing to work with, situations where no one saw anything, and no obvious explanation presents itself. It's almost as if these people literally vanished into thin air. 1. Maura Murray. 10 years ago, Maura Murray packed her car, lied to professors about a death in the family and left Massachusetts. That night, on a rural road in the northern part of New Hampshire, the 21-year-old nursing student crashed her car. Then she vanished, leaving a tormented family, vexed investigators and a case rife with rumor and innuendo. Lead investigators say there hasn't been a single, credible sighting of her since minutes after her car spun into trees and a snowbank along Route 112 in North Haverhill just before 7:30 p.m. on February 9, 2004. The disappearance of the University of Massachusetts Amherst student is one of the most intriguing among scores of New Hampshire cold cases. No one knows for sure where Maura is or what happened to her, said Jeffrey Strolzin, Senior Assistant Attorney General. Fred Murray believes his daughter is dead, the victim of a crime, but he wants to keep her case in the public eye in hopes of finally knowing what really happened that night on the threshold of the White Mountain National Forest. There's no letting go, said Murray, a medical technician in Bridgeport, Connecticut. My daughter wouldn't want me to quit on her. She'd want me to keep trying to find out who grabbed her. Her father and some investigators believe she just wanted to get away for a few days. It had been a rough stretch for the standout student who had attended, and quickly left, the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. She had recently resolved a criminal matter involving use of a stolen credit card, and caused extensive damage to her father's car during a late-night crash. Then there was a mysterious and traumatizing call 4 days before she disappeared. She was working her security job at UMass Amherst when the phone rang, and she burst into tears. A supervisor ended up walking her home. The caller, and the subject of the call, remain unknown, but 2 days before she vanished, Maura was in good spirits as she and her father shopped for a used car for her and then went out to dinner. Before she left that Monday, she had already called several lodgings, including one in Bartlett, NH, that her family regularly visited. In her car were directions to Burlington, VT, said retired State Police Lieutenant John Healy, who has continued to investigate the disappearance. Headed east on 112, she lost control of the 1996 Saturn, tagged a tree and spun around so the car was facing west. A couple who live within sight of the scene called police. Butch Atwood, a school bus driver who lived nearby, told police he stopped by and asked Murray if she wanted him to call police. She said number. Atwood, who has since died, called anyway and appears to be the last person known to have spoken to Maura. A police report says the windshield was cracked on the driver's side, both airbags deployed and the car was locked. There was a box of wine on the back seat and a strong odor of alcohol. Healy, one of many investigators who have volunteered countless hours on the case, thinks Maura was the victim of a crime of opportunity. She got into the wrong car. She went to the wrong house, Healy said last week. 1 minute she's there, 10 minutes later she's not. In Maura's case, we're one step away from thinking alien abduction. It happened so fast, Healy said. Theories abound that Maura fled, possibly to Canada. Strolzin said it's unlikely, but not impossible, that the young woman had gone off to start a new life, but he and Healy agree that kind of disappearing takes careful planning, help and resources. Her father doesn't believe it. I don't think she'd put us through this, he said. She would have called me. I can't imagine her not calling. We were close, you know? Murray is frustrated and angry, convinced New Hampshire State Police didn't call in the FBI 10 years ago and still won't for fear of exposing their own foibles. She was out there helpless, her father said. Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, no one to ask for help. I think some local dirtbag grabbed her. He fought in vain all the way to the New Hampshire Supreme Court to get the investigation's records. If I saw the case records, I would know what I have to chase myself, Murray said. You get frustrated and it gnaws at you. You can't get rid of it. 2. Brandon Swanson. It was the last day of classes, and Brandon Swanson, a 19-year-old freshman at Minnesota West Community and Technical College, was celebrating with his friends. Swanson called home shortly after midnight May 14, 2008, telling his parents he needed a ride because he had driven into a ditch in the neighboring town of Lind, Minnesota. Annette and Brian Swanson immediately set out in their pickup to look for their son and his green Chevy Lumina sedan. "We got in the pickup to go to this spot where he felt he was," Brian Swanson recalled. He thought he knew exactly where his son was. About 10 minutes from their home in Marshall, he was absolutely positive he knew where he was, Brian Swanson said. The parents stayed on the phone, talking to their son as they headed to pick him up, but when they arrived, there was no car and no Brandon. They turned around and flashed the lights on their truck. "We were saying, we're flashing our lights," Annette Swanson said. Over the phone, they could hear their son working the light switch in his car. "Click click, click click. Don't you see me?" he asked. There was nothing, his father said. Absolutely nothing. Everyone grew frustrated. At one point, he hung up on me, so I called him back and apologized, his mother said. Swanson told his parents he would walk back to his friend's house in Lind. His father drove home to drop Annette off and then headed back to look for the teen. They exchanged calls just before 2 a.m. and eventually carried on a long conversation while the younger Swanson was walking, trying to direct his father to where he was. He told his father to look for him at a nightclub parking lot that was a popular meeting spot in Lind. But at the 47-minute mark, the call ended abruptly. The teen shouted an expletive, and the phone went dead. It was the last time anyone heard from him. "We called at least 5 or 6 more times," his father said. He never picked up the phone again. The Swansons turned to their son's friends for help. They searched all night, driving down dirt roads and through farmland. There was no sign of him. At 6:30 a.m., Annette Swanson called the Lind Police Department to report Brandon missing, and officers eventually joined the search. They, too, came up with nothing, and a county-wide request was dispatched to expand the search. The response was delayed because, officers pointed out, it was not that unusual for a 19-year-old to stay out all night after finishing college classes, Annette Swanson said. One remark stayed with her. An officer said that at his age, her son had a right to be missing. Phone records later showed that the teen was nowhere near Lind, where he told his parents he was. His cell phone calls were traced to a tower 20 miles away in Minnesota. That afternoon, Lyon County Police found Swanson's vehicle in Porter, approximately 25 miles from Lind. It was off the side of a field approach, and the vehicle was hung up, Lincoln County Sheriff Jack Vieski said. "It's sort of a sharp incline. Nothing major but enough that the car would get hung up so the wheels are too high off the ground to get any traction." Nothing else unusual was found at the site, and officers could not determine which direction the teen had headed after he left the vehicle. "There's grass in the ditch and gravel on the road, so it's possible to leave that vehicle and not leave any tracks," Vieski said. Investigators brought in search dogs, and they led investigators to woods by the bank of the Yellow Medicine River. The river's depth ranges from knee-high in certain areas to 15 feet in others. At the time Swanson went missing, it was flowing high and fast. There are 2 miles of the river in that area, and it took 6 hours to walk it, Vieski said. He said he personally walked the river every day for 30 days. At the time, the dogs indicated, and it was believed, that he must have fallen in the river in that area, he added. "So we searched that area, on the premise that he'd be washed downstream, but investigators are not convinced that the teen fell into the river." Vieski said Swanson should have been found in the river or downstream, had he fallen in. Annette Swanson said she is not convinced her son drowned, either. "There really is nothing to indicate that he's in the river," she said. According to her, one bloodhound followed a scent from the stranded car down a gravel road to an abandoned farm. It was a long trail, about 3 miles, she added. The new trail path also led to the Yellow Medicine River. The dog actually jumped in the river, jumped back out, worked the trail up to another gravel road and then lost the scent, she said. Vieski leaves open the possibility of foul play. "The only thing would have been if someone was in the shadows, and they got him that way," he said. "I can't say there wasn't someone else there, but I can't find any evidence of it." Cadaver dogs and searchers, he explained, should have found a body or some evidence if Swanson had succumbed to the elements. I can't explain why clothing, belongings wouldn't surface, Vysky said. I can't explain why after searching for 3 weeks, the dogs could not smell anything. The Swansons want to know what happened to their son. You know, people don't vanish into thin air, but it sure seems like he did, Annette Swanson said. The couple is responsible for the enactment of Brandon's Law, which became effective in Minnesota on July 1, 2009. The law requires authorities to conduct a preliminary investigation without delay when a missing persons report is received. Brandon Swanson has brown hair and blue eyes, stands 5 feet 6 inches and weighs 125 pounds. When last seen, he was wearing blue jeans, a white or black hat twisted to the side, and a white short-sleeved shirt. 3. Louis Le Prince. Several years before the work of Auguste, Louis Lumiere and Thomas Edison, in October 1888, Louis Le Prince recorded the first moving images in Leeds at Roundhay Park, and on Leeds Bridge using his single-lens camera and Eastman's paper film. However, he was never able to perform a planned public demonstration in the United States, because he mysteriously disappeared after boarding a Paris-bound train in Dijon on September 16, 1890. Louis-Aimé Augustin Le Prince was born in Metz, France on August 28, 1842, and moved to Leeds in 1866, to work for John Whitley Partners of Hunslet Brass founders. He was known as a chemist, an engineer, an inventor, also a filmmaker who shot the first moving pictures on paper film using a single-lens camera. In 1869 he married Elizabeth Whitley John's sister, a talented artist. The pair founded Leeds Technical School of Art. In 1888 Le Prince was granted an American dual patent on a 16-lens device that combined a motion picture camera with a projector. A patent for a single-lens type was refused in America, because of an interfering patent. Yet a few years later the same patent was not opposed when the American Thomas Edison applied for one. By using his 16-lens camera, Louis Le Prince recorded the world's first moving images, at 160 Woodhouse Lane, a site now owned by the University of Leeds. His first film called Roundhay Garden Scene was created in 1888, and his second and more famous film called Leeds Bridge Scene came in the same year. 2 years later, in September 1890, Le Prince was preparing to go back to the UK to patent his new camera, to be followed by a trip to the US to promote it. Before his journey, he decided to return home and visit friends and family. Having done so, he left Bourges on 13 September to visit his brother in Dijon. He would then take the 16 September train to Paris, but when the train arrived, his friends discovered that Le Prince was not on board. He was never seen again by his family or friends. No luggage or corpse was found in the Dijon-Paris Express, nor along the railway. No one saw Le Prince at the Dijon station, except his brother. No one saw Le Prince in the Dijon-Paris Express after he was seen boarding it. No one noticed any strange behavior or aggression in the Dijon-Paris Express. The French police, Scotland Yard and the family undertook exhaustive searches but never found his body or luggage. This mysterious disappearance case remained unsolved. Several theories explaining Le Prince's disappearance have been proposed, including claims he was murdered so he could not claim patents on his groundbreaking 16-lens camera. A close relative was involved in his disappearance to gain a large inheritance, and his family ordered him to disappear due to financial irregularities. In December 1930, a bronze memorial tablet was erected at 160 Woodhouse Lane where his workshop had stood, and an English heritage blue plaque can be found on the bridge honoring the historic moment. Since 1930, he has been heralded as the father of cinematography. 4. Michael Negrete. Negrete was a freshman at the University of California in Los Angeles, UCLA. In 1999, he lived on the 6th floor of Dykstra Hall Dormitory on campus, which is located near the intersection of Gelly Avenue and Strathmore Boulevard. Negrete had been playing a computer game with a friend for several hours. The game ended at approximately 4 a.m. on December 10, 1999, and he logged off of his computer at that time. Negrete's roommate awoke at 9 a.m. and discovered Negrete had disappeared. Authorities believe he left his room between 4 a.m. and 9 a.m. that day. All of Negrete's personal belongings, including his clothing, shoes, wallet and musical instruments, were left behind in his residence. He has never been heard from again. Search dogs tracked Negrete sent to Sunset Boulevard and Bellagio Street in Los Angeles, but no other evidence was located. Authorities released a sketch of a possible witness in Negrete's case in 2000. The unidentified Caucasian man was seen inside Dykstra Hall at 4:35 a.m. on December 10. Investigators do not know if the individual is connected to Negrete's case or if he did indeed witness anything, but they would like to question him. A sketch of the man is posted below this case summary. He is described as being approximately 35 years old in 1999, and 5'7" to 5'8" tall with a heavy build. The man was wearing a shiny gray jacket with a turquoise-colored design. The individual has yet to be identified. Negrete did not have a vehicle at UCLA. He left behind his parents and 2 younger brothers. His family said they could not uncover any hidden secret he may have had at the time which would have led to his disappearance. Authorities have few leads in Negrete's case. Negrete is described as having a loud, sudden laugh. He says "doop" when he is pleased. He sings jazz songs to himself. He does not like bare feet. He recites trivia dealing with the Simpsons television series, and he enjoys computer and video games. Negrete is also a skilled trumpet and steel drum player. Negrete's case remains unsolved, but police suspect foul play. There has been no activity on his bank account, credit cards, or Ralph's Club card since before his disappearance. At the time he went missing, he was a good student attending college on a music scholarship. Authorities are investigating his disappearance as a homicide. 5. Barbara Bolick. From his kitchen table, Carl Bolick can look across the Bitterroot Valley to the place his wife vanished off the face of the earth last summer. Barbara Bolick was only supposed to have been gone a few hours on July 18. Instead, her hiking partner said the experienced hiker disappeared in less than a minute as he took one last look at the scenic view. The view was what brought Barbara back time after time to this place. Carl's wife of 14 years was an energetic hostess who loved showing visitors the scenery from Bear Creek Overlook. On this morning, she'd volunteered to take Jim Rawmaker, a friend of her husband's cousin from California, for the relatively easy hike up to the overlook in the Bitterroot Mountains. Anytime anyone came to visit, she'd always take them up there, Carl said, staring out the window toward the cloud-shrouded mountains. The view up there is absolutely spectacular, just breathtaking. Carl's cousin was feeling the effects of one too many frozen drinks the night before and decided not to go that morning. Carl was still sleeping when Barbara came and told him she and Rawmaker were going hiking to the overlook. The last thing he told her was not to worry about dinner. He'd take care of it. "I'll see you a little later," she said softly as she walked out the door. It was somewhere between 8:30 and 9 a.m. Carl spent the morning working on a carpentry project. When noon rolled around, his cousin started getting a little antsy about the fact Barbara and Jim hadn't returned. "I wasn't concerned a bit," Carl remembered. His wife was an avid hiker. She kept herself fit by running, riding and taking long walks into the mountains. And, as an added bit of insurance, Carl knew she had the .357 Magnum pistol he'd bought her packed away in her day pack. "I always used to kid about packing that gun away," he said. If she met up with a mountain lion or a bear, she wasn't going to have time to dig around and find that pistol. She was only about 5 feet tall and slight in build. She only weighed about 115 pounds. Still, Carl was sure his wife could take care of herself. She'd never venture far off the trail, and she didn't like heights. He knew she'd not get too close to the edge of any precipice. By 1:30, Carl's cousin was getting scared. He told her to calm down. Maybe they'd had a flat tire. An hour later and she was really upset. "She told me I needed to call somebody," Carl said. About that time, the phone rang. It was a Forest Service law enforcement officer. "She asked me if my wife's name was Barbara and I instantly thought something terrible had happened. Barbara's been reported missing," the officer said. "I said to her, 'No way.'" He remembered. Carl told the officer he'd meet her at the trailhead, in the back of his mind as he began the 20-mile drive to the Bear Creek Overlook trailhead. Carl was certain his wife would be there waiting for him. "I just couldn't accept it," he said. "I just knew that she was going to show up one way or another, but it didn't happen. It still hasn't happened." He's still waiting for her to return. "This whole case challenges our life experience," said Perry Johnson, lead investigator on the Barbara Bolick case for the Ravalli County Sheriff's Department. "Whenever we go hiking, we expect that we'll return to our vehicle with our hiking partners. We think nothing about it. That's just the way it is. Only this time it wasn't. On this morning, the road leading up the trailhead was blocked something less than a mile down the hill so a Forest Service crew could replace a culvert. By the time the crew arrived this day, there was already a pair of vehicles parked at the road closure sign, Rawmaker's vehicle and a light-colored older SUV that could have been a Chevrolet Blazer with Missoula County license plates. The Forest Service crew was busy digging up the roadway when a pair of young men in their early 20s came strolling into the work site. One of the men was considerably darker skinned than the other. They were well-tanned, average-fit young guys, Johnson said. They walked right through the construction site. As they stopped and talked for a bit, the crew remembered the black collie-like dog with white markings that enjoyed a few moments in the creek. The morning was already turning hot. The men walked off, seemingly without a care. Somewhere between 45 minutes and an hour later, Rawmaker walked into the site and asked the crew if they'd seen Barbara. One of the road crew walked with him back to the vehicle to see if she was there. Rawmaker walked back up to the overlook one more time. When he returned about an hour and a half later, he told the crew he needed help. He couldn't find Barbara anywhere. Rawmaker told investigators later that he and Barbara stopped at the overlook and had a snack. They'd seen the two young men and said something like, "How are you doing?" The pair then enjoyed the mountain views for maybe a half hour or 40 minutes, before deciding to head back down the hill. Rawmaker said Barbara was only about 20 or 30 feet away when he turned to take one more look at the scenery. It was a short look, maybe 45 seconds, maybe a minute. When he turned around, Barbara was gone. It was the last time he saw her. He'd tell investigators later. "This is really a tough one for me," Johnson said. "It's outside of my scope of experience. I haven't been able to find anyone else who's had a similar experience. We're talking about a minute and then you look back and she's gone. The area isn't tightly timbered, and there is a lot of loose shale rock around it. It's hard to creep quietly across that loose shale rock," Johnson said. "You'd make some noise. Just the fact that someone simply disappears like that is a cause for concern. I just don't have that life experience," he said. "How could that possibly happen?" Johnson believes the key to the case lies in identifying the two young men who were hiking the trail that day. He assumes they were local guys because of the Missoula license plates and the fact they were hiking on a Wednesday morning. The family of Barbara Bolick has offered a $10,000 reward for information leading to their identification. "I don't suspect them of doing anything wrong," Johnson said. "I don't think they were even in the wrong place at the wrong time. What the men can do is confirm that Barbara Bolick was there that morning. Right now, I don't have a witness to confirm or conflict with the information we've gathered so far," he said. "These guys are the key to the whole thing." Johnson has been surprised that no one has stepped forward to help identify the pair. "This is the first time that we've had a $10,000 reward offered to help us locate a witness," he said. "The person who helps us locate them will get $10,000. As of now, Barbara Bolick's case remains a mystery. Right after her disappearance, the Sheriff's Department deployed search teams, brought in highly trained dogs, and even called in high-tech infrared helicopters to scour the area. Johnson said they never found a thing. Rawmaker has returned to California, but continues to cooperate in the investigation. Johnson said, "He's been cooperative and returned all of our calls." Johnson said, "He stayed in contact with us until something else happens. We find Barbara or find her body. I think he's just a witness. I want to be fair to Jim Rawmaker," Johnson said. "There's no evidence he did anything to Barbara." Meanwhile, Johnson said Barbara's family and friends can only wait and hope. "I think these kinds of cases are just devastating to families," Johnson said. "There's no closure. Every day they are looking for something, some kind of answer. It's going on 5 months since Barbara disappeared, and the phone calls to Carl's home are more infrequent now. The couple met when Carl was still an Air Force officer working on an air base in New Jersey. They decided later to move to Montana, but Barbara really didn't take to the wind and cold of his hometown in Dillon. The first time he saw the Bitterroot was with her. She fell in love with the place and they eventually bought some land near Darby. Later they settled on a home near Corvallis. We used to hike a bit together before I had my heart attack and couldn't go anymore, Carl said. I think she hiked every canyon here. She knew them all pretty well. It's hard for Carl to fathom that she disappeared on the trail that was her favorite. There are a lot of theories bandied about, he said. Some think foul play was involved. Others have wondered if a mountain man spotted in the area might have played a part. Still others have asked Carl if he thought maybe his wife had just walked away. In his mind, Carl is sure she didn't just leave. She wouldn't have left without her beloved dog that had adopted her at a gun show. Nor would she leave her cat. All of her childhood keepsakes were still at the house. Her billfold, identification, and passport were all still there. But mostly, Carl believed she wouldn't have done that to her family and friends. Over the last 5 months, no one has heard anything from her, he said. I'm not the only one agonizing over this. Her family, my son, my daughter, my mother, our friends. It's been hard on a lot of people. Barbara was 55 when she disappeared. She would have turned 56 on August 25th. People don't want to talk about it as much. It's to the point that people don't want to bring it up anymore, he said. It's too emotional. The only answer that I have right now is that I just don't know. I don't know what happened to her. None of it makes any sense, he said, staring out the window toward the Bitterroot Mountains. None of it makes any sense. She was only 20 feet away. That's not that far. 6. Michael Hearon. For Matt Hearon and his older brother, Andy, it took a couple of years for the anger to subside. Now, 1,462 sunrises since their father was last seen near the family home in Happy Valley. So has hope of seeing him alive again. Days after Michael Hearon, then 51, waved to neighbor as he rode his four-wheeler up Bell Branch Road into a mystery. Blount County mobilized to try to find the man in the hollows and forests near the house where he had gone that Saturday morning to mow. The four-wheeler was found, but beyond that, not so much as a footprint. 4 years and a day since that Saturday, the mystery remains pretty much as it was then. In the interim, Andy and Matt have established careers of their own, and each has fathered a boy, both with the middle name of Michael. There is nothing much new to report in the case, the men say, mostly talk and rumors, says Matt Hearon. No significant leads, says his brother. Hope that their father will somehow emerge from whatever shadowy place he wandered into has all but evaporated. Both sons believe Michael Hearon's disappearance was the result of foul play. I've had time to come up with many scenarios in my mind, Matt Hearon said. He would hear something and then his mind would race off in that direction looking for an answer that has been consistently elusive. I believe, he said, that he happened upon something that should not have been going on and that may have cost Michael Hearon his life. Andy concurs. He said his father didn't have enemies even in the competitive construction industry. But, he said, if confronted, his father was not the type to back down. He would stand his ground. He was not a flight kind of a guy. He was not afraid to say something if he encountered a wrong being perpetrated. Physical evidence at the scene, outside of a four-wheeler parked in the bushes with its ignition key still in the on position, would not have filled a thimble. No footprints, no bits of torn clothing, no obvious trail through the undergrowth, no blood, tissue or bones, nothing to indicate Michael Hearon had even been there, much less a direction of departure. The search, involving hundreds of civilian participants and law enforcement personnel, went on for days. It was hampered, Matt Hearon said, by rains that hit the area between the time his father was last seen and when the search began. Indeed, it was raining lightly the morning the search started. The weather, in theory, could have washed away tracks and sharply diminished the scent trail that dogs were asked to follow. The dogs scented on the truck, Andy Hearon said. Michael Hearon had gone to the house that morning in his pickup truck, pulling a trailer bearing a mower. The family found the truck still in the driveway with the windows down and the trailer still attached. mower in place. Inside the truck were the missing man's keys, wallet, money and credit cards, cell phone. Basically all the personal items one usually carries on them, but no Michael Hearon. A neighbor said he exchanged waves with Michael as the man rode his four-wheeler back down the one-lane Bell Branch road away from the house. No one acknowledges seeing him after that. Hearon's son said a friend of their father's found the four-wheeler by chance well off any paved road about a mile from the house. Searchers combed both the area around the house, on ATVs and on horseback, and the area near where Hearon's four-wheeler was found. We don't feel like he put the four-wheeler there backed into some bushes, Andy Hearon said. It was not on property Hearon owned and on a road he did not frequent. I don't know why he would have been on that road, Matt Hearon said. That makes me believe it was foul play. Marion O'Brien, Public Information Officer for the Blount County Sheriff's Office, said the Hearon case remains an open investigation, but there have been no new leads in about a year. The Hearon family, though not large in number, was a tight one, the son said. Dad was big on family, Andy Hearon said. He loved being outdoors and being here on the Bell Branch property. In the past he had worked clearing trails in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, which abuts the family property, and had even participated in rescue efforts there. Michael Hearon would not have voluntarily abandoned his family, they said. I don't think he is still alive, Matt Hearon said, or he would have gotten back by now. Michael Hearon was looking forward to grandkids and even gave Matt's bride, Jamie, a home pregnancy test kit the night before their wedding in July 2007. They now have a son named Avery Michael Hearon who is 10 weeks old. Andy Hearon was married to his wife, Casey, about 3 months before Michael Hearon's disappearance. They have a son named Abram Michael Hearon, age 1 1/2. The hardest part, Matt Hearon said, is coming up with a reason for his father's disappearance. Andy Hearon agrees. He wants closure and talks about ideas coming through my head concerning the case. Both say for the first 1 1/2 to 2 years they felt a sense of anger. I was in a bad mood, Matt Hearon said, angry at everybody. There was a cloud hanging over me. Same for Andy, who added that he had to be told by his wife, I cannot let it do that to me. Matt Hearon said, I've got 60 years left, and I cannot live in anger, but I think about it every day. Andy Hearon is in the same place. I can't ponder on it. Saturday the Hearon family will hold their annual hike for Mike to raise awareness of the case and keep it visible. The short hike will be in the Abrams Creek area near the Hearon home and will begin at 10 a.m. at the Happy Valley Community Center on Happy Valley Road. 7. April Fab. As Robert Black, Britain's worst child killer, last night began a 35-year sentence for murder, senior detectives were hoping to interview him about a lengthy series of other sex murders. Police hope Black may be persuaded to confess to murders they suspect he has committed since the late 1960s, but the length of time and the difficulties in assembling a coherent prosecution case means it is unlikely he will stand trial for any of the killings, even if he admits them. Police officers who have investigated his background since his arrest in 1990 are confident that he could be questioned about at least 6 or 7 cases which remain unsolved in England, 1 or 2 in Northern Ireland and 3 in France. It may well be that Black has killed even more children, but estimates of at least 19 have been discounted by police sources. The difficulty facing the police, if they are unable to trace Black's whereabouts through receipts indicating his movements in the areas where the outstanding murders took place, is the unlikelihood of any confession from Black. His remark to the police of "well done, boys" as he left the dock yesterday was sneering comment on their inquiries so far, to which he has given no help. Top of the police list will be the disappearance, on August 19, 1978, of Jeanette 8, 13. Who vanished while on her newspaper round in Aylesbury, Devon. Her body was never found, only her bicycle left lying in a country lane. At the time there was speculation that Jeanette had been knocked down by a car and her body then hidden. The teenager was last seen cycling through her home village. She stopped to talk to 2 friends and then rode on and was never seen again. There are at least another 3 girls whose disappearance might be laid against Black. April Fab, 13. Vanished in 1969. While cycling in her home village of Metton in Norfolk, a county Black visited regularly, Her bicycle was found in a field 600 yards away from her home. Her body was never traced. Norfolk police have already spoken with the Lothian and Borders force about her disappearance. Christine Markham, 9, disappeared on her way home from school in Scunthorpe, Humberside, in May 1973. Black will almost certainly be interviewed by the Humberside force about her. Colette R., 16, was a trainee hairdresser who vanished on October 30, 1983. She was walking to see some friends in Keyworth, Nottinghamshire. When she was grabbed, she was found strangled and sexually assaulted in a field a mile away the next day. The police will talk to Black about 2 or 3 other child murders in England, the details of which have not been disclosed, and 2 cases of missing children in County Antrim in Northern Ireland. The French police are known to have made contact with British detectives concerning Black's movements in France during the 1980s, although Lothian and Borders police refused to discuss the contacts. 3 French children, who have not been named, are all thought to have been kidnapped and killed in remote areas, and the French authorities are anxious to know whether Black has been pinpointed in any area close by. It is known that Black had access to a caravan in France and regularly traveled through the country during the 1980s, possibly to visit the Dordogne home of the London family with whom he lodged for many years. Black was always keen to make long-distance poster deliveries on behalf of the London company where he worked. He also traveled to the Netherlands and Denmark, usually to collect child pornographic magazines and video films not obtainable in this country. The prosecution's case against Black was, in part, based on the fact that he had already abducted a 6-year-old girl in the Scottish Borders in 1990, in exactly the same way that the 3 other girls, Susan Maxwell, Carolyn Hogg and Sarah Harper, were kidnapped. The case was built on the meticulous collection of evidence covering Black's movements throughout Britain between July 1982, when Susan Maxwell was abducted, and 1990, when a girl called Teresa Thornhill, then 15, was almost kidnapped and killed by Black. The same techniques could now be used to build a case against him for the unsolved murders. 8. Brian Shaffer. Shaffer was last seen at the Ugly Tuna Saloon, a bar near the Ohio State University, USU, campus, between 1:30 and 2 a.m. on April 1, 2006. He had gone there to celebrate the beginning of spring break with several male friends, and drank several shots of hard liquor. He was last seen speaking to 2 college-age women inside the bar. He has never been heard from again. Security cameras at the bar show him entering the establishment, but not leaving it. Shaffer's car was found parked at his apartment, which is near the Ugly Tuna Saloon, after his disappearance. None of his personal belongings disappeared with him, and his cellular phone, credit cards and bank accounts have not been used since he went missing. Shaffer's loved ones described his disappearance as highly unusual. He was a second-year medical student at USU at the time of his disappearance, and made excellent grades. He and his girlfriend, also a medical student, were planning to vacation in Miami, Florida for spring break and were scheduled to fly there on April 3, 2 days after his disappearance. His family reported him missing after he missed the flight. Shaffer was in love with his girlfriend and reportedly planned to marry her. His mother died of cancer 3 weeks before his disappearance. He'd been close to her and he was grieving her passing, but his family and friends stated he was not inordinately depressed or suicidal. In May 2006, someone broke into Shaffer's apartment. The burglary turned out to be unrelated to his disappearance. Shaffer's father looked in the Olatangi River for his son's remains after his disappearance, but turned up no evidence. His father was killed in a freak accident in September 2008. Shaffer's only surviving relative is his younger brother. Authorities do not believe Shaffer left of his own accord, but it is unclear what caused his disappearance. He graduated Pickerington High School in 1997, and got a bachelor's degree in microbiology from USU in 2003. Shaffer's case remains unsolved. 9. Jason Jolkowski. When their 19-year-old son, Jason, disappeared 8 years ago, any concept of a normal life ceased for the Jolkowski family. Kelly and Jim Jolkowski and their other son, Michael, believed at first that Jason would walk through the front door of their Omaha, Nebraska, home at any moment. Now, Every time a body is found somewhere, the news sets their hearts pounding. To this day, police say they have no evidence of foul play, nor, they say, do they have any evidence that Jason simply ran away. It is a bona fide mystery. Kelly Jolkowski described her life in an open letter to her missing son a year ago. "We waited and hoped that you'd walk in the door, and that the whole awful event would be over, but that didn't happen," she wrote. "It feels as if it never may end, and that we may have to wait for our life after this world to see you again." Since shortly after Jason's disappearance, the Jolkowskis have thrown their energy into raising public awareness about what to do when a loved one goes missing. After 3 years of lobbying, they were able to get a law passed in Nebraska creating a statewide missing persons database. They founded a non-profit organization called Project Jason, and its website tracks missing persons cases across the country. According to the site, Project Jason has distributed some 50,000 missing persons flyers since 2003. "We feel that some good is coming out of Jason's story," Kelly Jolkowski told CNN, but she said she still hopes to find her son someday. The last time anyone who knew him saw him, Jason Jolkowski was bringing the empty trash cans in from the curb. That was June 13, 2001. Since then, his cell phone has fallen silent and his bank account hasn't been touched. His last paycheck was never cashed. Jason was 19 and attending community college part-time. He had a job at a restaurant and wanted to be a disc jockey. On the day he disappeared, Jason and his younger brother, Michael, were on summer break from school. Their parents were at work, and the boys were home alone. Jason worked at a restaurant called Fizzly's. His boss had called him that morning and asked him to come in to work on his day off. Jason's car was at the mechanic's shop, so his boss arranged a ride for him with a co-worker. She and Jason were to meet at a high school parking lot that was within walking distance from the Jolkowskis' home. According to his mother, Jason had walked that 7-block route before. It took him along quiet, residential streets with little pedestrian or vehicle traffic. Jason was last seen at 10:15 that morning, standing at the end of his driveway. Less than an hour later, his boss called and spoke with Michael, complaining that Jason had not shown up for work and had never arrived at the high school to meet his ride. His parents arrived home from work to learn that Jason had been missing all day. They called Jason's friends. None of them had seen or heard from him that day. Jason was a quiet boy. His mother said, "He only had a small handful of friends. He was shy." Jason did not have a girlfriend and was not the sort of person to take risks, like hitching a ride with a complete stranger, his mother insisted. His parents called police the next morning. Like so many people, the Jolkowskis mistakenly believed there was a 24-hour wait before police would accept a missing persons report. And then it took at least another 10 days before police took Jason's disappearance seriously, Kelly Jolkowski said. They assumed this was a typical teen runaway scenario. But according to the family, Jason did not have a history of running away and was not a troubled teen. He had no reason to run off. From the beginning, his family feared an accident or abduction. Police began to interview neighbors and conducted searches 10 days after his disappearance, but valuable time had been lost, Kelly Jolkowski said. "We'd have liked to see more activity in the first crucial hours, but we do feel they stepped up to the plate to do all they could, and in the end, they did a proper investigation," the Jolkowskis said in a prepared statement. "We were pleased by the meetings they had with us, following up on any leads, talking to his friends, checking the computer and conducting interviews. Despite mounted searches, ground searches, a helicopter and the use of infrared technology, there was no sign of Jason or any clues to his whereabouts." The family is not certain whether dogs were brought to track the route between the Jolkowski home and the high school, but his mother said she believes that if police had any evidence, they would have shared it with the family. Detective Jim Shields of the Omaha Police Department said the case remains an open and active investigation. "I know his parents have expressed concern about how the investigation was handled in the beginning," he said, "but in missing adult cases, often we wait a few days because adults have the right to come and go freely." Police said they have no clues or evidence in the case. It is categorized as a missing persons case, and authorities have no evidence suggesting Jason is no longer alive. "We simply don't know and really hope for more tips," Shields said, at the time he went missing, Jason would have only had about $60 on him. His mother said, she speculated in her open letter about what his life might be like now. If you are still with us, you could be married and have children. You may have graduated from college and be pursuing a career, she wrote. So many life events which normally happen with someone of your age may have passed by. We hope and pray that you haven't been cheated of the life you were meant to live. Jason Jolkowski is described as 6 feet 1 inch and 165 pounds with brown hair and brown eyes. He was last seen wearing a Chicago Cubs t-shirt, black dress pants and black dress shoes. 10. Nicole Morin. Art Morin still believes she's alive. 25 years after his 8-year-old daughter Nicole vanished without a trace from her Etobicoke apartment July 30, 1985, Morin, now 71, has hope that one day he will hug his daughter again. I couldn't imagine that it would be 25 years, and she's still missing, Morin said from his Etobicoke home, about 10 minutes away from the apartment complex where she went missing. When Nicole disappeared, I honestly believed we would be able to find her. I cannot help but keep my hope up that one day, she will surface again. It was about 11 a.m. on July 30, 1985 when Nicole said goodbye to her mother in her West Mall apartment in the Rathburn Road and Highway 427 area. She went to ride the elevator to the lobby where her friend, Jennifer, was waiting. Nicole never met her friend in the lobby. The brown-haired, toothy-smiled girl, who was last seen dressed in a coral-colored bathing suit, had vanished. Nicole's disappearance sparked a firestorm of media attention worldwide, and the subsequent police investigation is still considered one of the largest and most expensive ever conducted by the Toronto Police. However, throughout the 25 years of media attention, manpower and resources devoted to the case, including private investigators hired by Morin, not a single clue has emerged about what happened to Nicole that fateful morning. I really don't like to think that she's dead, but she hasn't turned up. You could say maybe that I'm having false hope, Morin says. Nicole's case has taken several twists and turns throughout the years, many of which had been documented in the recent book Unsolved: True Canadian Cold Cases by Robert Jolkowski. After she went missing, a notebook was found in her bedroom with a note scrawled by Nicole that read, "I'm going to disappear." At one point in the investigation, police traveled to Quebec to interview Art Morin's brother-in-law, who was convicted of murdering Morin's sister Gertrude in 1961. He has since died and police determined he was not in Toronto at the time of Nicole's disappearance. Throughout the 1990s, Morin remained active in the case, working with Toronto police and hiring a private investigator, often traveling to various destinations in the United States following any possible lead in the case. In 2001, an updated photo of Nicole showing her as a woman in her mid-20s was sent via the internet to over 1,000 Crime Stoppers programs in 17 countries worldwide. And still, no clue emerged as to Nicole's whereabouts. Morin, who has been consumed and haunted by Nicole's disappearance, felt he did everything he humanly could do as a father, and has since ceased actively pursuing leads to find Nicole. He says he has not marked the 25th anniversary of her disappearance in any special way. "She's just in my thoughts and, of course, I cannot allow myself to dwell there, reliving all those memories again. It's just too emotional and I had to focus on my life." Nicole's mother Jeanette, whom Morin was separated from, died of a heart attack in 2007, never knowing what became of her daughter. If alive, Nicole would be 33 today. A Facebook vigil titled "Find Nicole Morin" still continues, with some of Nicole's childhood friends, family and well-wishers posting messages. "The first day Nicole went missing, I said Nicole is in God's hands. Well, that's where it sits." 25 years later, Morin says, "I still have to hang on to some hope for the future. That maybe, she might still be alive somewhere."